This is Emily Hull with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University. Today is Friday, April 6, 2018, and I'm in Ada, Oklahoma at the Scissortail Literary Festival interviewing Sly Alley for the Deep Roots Oklahoma Authors Oral History Project. Sly, you're a poet, a short fiction writer, and your book Strong Medicine won the 2017 Oklahoma Book Award for poetry. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born not far from where we're sitting right now.
Mm-hmm.
It was Carl Albert Indian Hospital at the time, here in Ada, and that was on May 6th in 1983. And my first year after that, we lived in Red Rock, Oklahoma,
Mm-hmm.
which is a few hours away to the north. And we slowly migrated back south, and by the time I was in sixth grade, by the time I was in sixth grade, we were in Tecumseh, and that's where I still live today.
Okay. So what memories do you have of Red Rock? What's it like? What's the town like?
We lived in the Otoe, Missouri tribal housing, which is right off Highway 177.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there when I was very, very young, and we've been back a lot in my in-between years. And there wasn't a whole lot out there. At the time, there was the tribal headquarters, which was an old Bureau of Indian Affairs building that was built the late 1890s, early 1900s. And other than that, there was a gas station and tribal housing that was built probably in the 60s or 70s. And that was it, farmland.
Mm-hmm.
From there to Stillwater and there to Ponca City.
You have any siblings?
I have several half-siblings.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's first marriage, I have a sister. And my father's first 3 marriages.
Mm-hmm.
I have a half-brother and half-sister in Florida that I've never met. Mm-hmm. I have 2 half-sisters that live in Oklahoma still, and they're in their 40s, 50s. So they're a lot older than me.
Yeah. So tell me about your parents. How would you describe their personalities, their interests? What were they like?
Resilient, for one. They broke. My mother came from a family that had 6 siblings. I think she was the oldest of 6. She was born in 1952 in a farming family. My dad was born in 1942. He was the oldest of 4. And by the age of 12, he was basically an adult. In those days, it was once you're old enough to work, you're on your own.
Mm-hmm.
The thing he always told me was that when he was growing up, the older folks would tell him that the most we can promise you is maybe a place to sleep and a blanket, and the rest of it, it's going to be up to you. So they were both kind of grew up in resilient times. They had to be resilient. I mean, it was hauling water and stuff that today I don't think a lot of people would want to do.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, I think that prepared them, in life to be able to get by with very little. We were never, I never starved or anything, but we had some times where you're having to choose between maybe gas in the car and paying rent. So,
yeah. What were their names?
Regina is my mother's name. Her maiden name was Harper. She's a citizen Potawatomi, and then European mix, her Scots, Irish, and that area of the world. Mm-hmm. And my father's name was Abe, A-B-E, not Abraham, mm-hmm. which was a strange thing, but Abe, and his middle name's Sylvester, which is where I get my first name. And he is Otoe, Missouri, Iowa, Native American, and a very small tribe.
Mm-hmm. How about your grandparents? Did Did you know them, or were you around them?
Yeah, I knew my grandmother on my dad's side. Her name was Anna Tohi, is her married name. Her maiden name was Anna Cahiga, and she was the great-granddaughter, I believe, if I remember right, great-granddaughter of, descendant of Chief White Cloud of the Ioways.
How do you spell her name?
Anna, and the last name was Kihega. And so that was, as far as my dad's side, that's about, I knew his cousins and stuff, but as far as my grandparents, I never met his father, and I believe he passed away when I was very little. On my mother's side, her father, Don Harper, farmer, grew up as a farming kid, joined the Navy during Korea, served, he was worked in the boiler room on ships and submarines during Korea. Came back to Shawnee, Oklahoma, and was a fire captain. I think he retired there in the 70s. Then moved to Texas and lived there until he died in 2002, I believe. Her mother, Louise, I think her maiden name was Laughlin. Kind of the same story with hers. Rural farming family, and married my grandpa and had 6 or 7 kids.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, that's about my grandma and I was a lot closer to my grandma on my father's side because we stayed in Perkins, just a few blocks from her house is where I spent a lot of time as a kid, and she would babysit and stuff like that. So I knew her with my grandfather on my mom's side living in Texas and stuff. The logistics of it all, it was a lot closer to my dad's mom than any of the others.
Yeah. What did you enjoy doing together when she
we used to play catch, which was
really?
weird, yeah.
Yeah.
Because my dad was going to school in New Mexico at the time, and my mom was working as a medical transcriptionist. So summer times, or times when she had to work or something, my grandma would come over and we had a Nerf football, and she'd sit in the chair and throw it to me, and we'd play catch and that kind of stuff. She was, a lot older when I was very little, so wasn't a whole lot she could do physically. But she would cook and that kind of stuff, the stuff that grandmas do.
Yeah. Did she have a specialty, something that she cooked that you really loved?
She made a thing, and I think it's kind of making a comeback in native cuisine, but the grape dumplings, which is basically just kind of like flour and like you would make a normal dumpling, just roll up some flour and boil it in grape juice and put sugar in it.
Ooh, that sounds good. How would you describe yourself as a child? What were you like?
Shy. I was very shy. Quiet for the most part. I don't know. I don't want to sound like I'm like bragging or anything, but I really liked reading, and I really would get into something, and my parents or my grandma or somebody would go to the library and I'd consume whatever books I could find on stuff. Dinosaurs, I think, was the first thing. And I learned like scientific names and stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff that most, 3-4-year-old kids wouldn't. But shy was probably the main thing, because I always taught, if you're talking to somebody older or something, shake their hand, and if they ask you something, respond, and if they're not talking to you, kind of go over there and play.
Yeah. So besides the reading, did you have any other hobbies or interests that you enjoyed doing?
Hobbies and interests. Legos.
Yeah.
Big into Legos. My mom hated that because it would just be, I'd carve
They hurt when you
paths.
step
Yeah,
on them.
my room would be like a path from the door to maybe the closet, and then everything else was Legos. So I always like building stuff, figuring out how stuff works, that kind of stuff. Just normal kid stuff. I'd say playing, riding bikes, playing basketball and that kind of stuff. But
What was your favorite subject in school?
Most of the time, history, social studies, that kind of stuff. I left school middle of my sophomore year in high school. I just kind of bored with school at that point, but social studies and history were consistently the ones, because I think they were the ones that changed the most from year to year, and it was always something you kind of got something new or got something a little bit into something a little bit deeper. There's like math and stuff. I mean, here's your multiplication table again.
Yeah. So
it's kind of repetitive and boring to me, but yeah, those were consistently in English, of course. But, by the time I got into high school, our English classes weren't. It was like maybe a book report. It wasn't really anything challenging or in depth. So history and that always kind of kept that challenge going enough to where I really enjoyed those classes.
What were books that meant a lot to you, maybe when you were younger, or made you feel transformed in some way?
When I was younger, probably I remember reading Flowers for Algernon, and that one kind of being one that was in, I picked that up probably in grade school, 4th grade, 3rd grade, somewhere in there. And I remember, and I haven't read that. I don't think I've read it maybe once or twice since.
Yeah.
But I remember that book being the one that I was like, this is something, I mean, my mom was somebody that we'd go to the library usually once or twice a week. T.S. Eliot was something. I mean, it sounds weird, but she would read that to me at times. So, I was exposed to a lot of different books at an early age. But I remember T.S. Eliot, Flowers for Algernon. I mean, you get the basic stuff in school that Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, and half the time they try to ban those, but you're exposed to those. But I remember T.S. Eliot stuff and Flowers for Algernon being the ones that really stuck out. Really enjoyed those.
Did you write as a kid, like write stories or plays or keep a journal?
Yeah, sometimes. I remember me and a cousin of mine had this grand scheme that we were going to start writing comic books and put them in the grocery store to sell.
Yeah.
But I would, and book reports and essays and stuff like that. I think I enjoyed that kind of stuff because I'd read enough of it that I knew how to at least mimic it, if not, I think that's kind of one of the steps to becoming creative is you learn how to mimic something first. I mean, that's how you learn most things anyway, is you mimic and then you build upon that as a foundation. But so I always kind of had that, and I always felt like I could communicate better, like letters, back then it was like a thing you did in school where you write a letter to somebody and then put it in the mail, and you learn how the postal system works. So yeah, I think the writing and stuff was something that was always kind of around, something we always utilized, and it came, I think, fairly easy to me. I didn't always embrace it, but it felt like it came pretty easy.
What did you dream of becoming as a kid? What was your
like I mentioned before, dinosaurs were big, so paleontologist was the first thing. Actually, before that, I think it was a police officer when I was real little, and then once I kind of understood, or thought I understood how working and careers worked, I wanted to be a paleontologist. And then by the time I hit 6th grade, maybe I didn't see that happening. But yeah, paleontology, really, study of dinosaur bones. I always thought that would be something fun.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my sisters is married to a paleontologist.
Oh,
and
really? Wow.
It doesn't sound as fun as I pictured it as a kid.
Yeah. So what did you do after high school?
So I got out of high school middle of my sophomore year.
Yeah.
The week I turned 16, I got a job washing dishes at Billy Boy's Barbecue in Shawnee, Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah. What was that like?
It was, yeah. I was surprised that I got the job, for one, being just turned 16 and not in school.
Mm-hmm.
But I got my GED not long after that.
Mm-hmm.
While I was working at Billy Boy's, I was going to VOTEC to learn aviation maintenance,
Mm-hmm.
which was kind of thing my mom said, if you're not going to go to high school, you got to learn a trade. So I started out into aviation maintenance, which I have two very good friends that still do that today.
Mm-hmm.
And they make a lot more money than a
Mm-hmm.
poet. But so that was kind of just worked, really. I washed dishes, and then I went and worked at an airport in Shawnee. I was a station manager for a refueling service there, and handled hangar rent and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for 2 years. Then some friends of mine got into a business called paintless dent repair, and I did that from 2004 up until I started college at Seminole State in 2009, I think it was. And that was an interesting business because you chased hailstorms and fixed hail damage on cars.
Yeah.
So I got to see a lot. I traveled, we're 6, 7, 8 months out of the year, we're somewhere. And so I got to see a lot of different aspects of America that I would, never have seen, or if I'd have seen it, it would have been in much smaller proportions in Oklahoma.
Where did you go? What were?
The first storm I went to, it hailed in a place called, I want to say it was Brooklyn Park, Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Brooklyn Heights, something like that. It was in Minnesota, kind of outside of St. Paul. And it was in October, I believe, of that year, late in the hail season. And we got there and worked 2 days, and a company came in and underbid the company that we were working for. So we were there for 2 days. I made, I think, like $150, and we turned around, got in the car, and drove back to Shawnee.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, once the next spring hit, I was in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Texas a lot, Oklahoma a few times, which is strange because it hails here a lot. But
Mm-hmm.
nobody gets their car fixed because they all know a guy.
Yeah.
But, spent a lot of time in Texas, a lot of time in Connecticut, Pennsylvania, a little bit of time in Georgia, and Florida. Spent a little bit of time in Florida.
Any funny stories or anything while you're on the road that you can tell that you want to tell?
Yeah. I mean, you meet some weird people, and it's
Yeah.
in the business itself. It's very similar to construction guys or roofers and stuff like that. You get a mix of really good workers, and then a mix of a lot of people that are on drugs and heavy drinking and gambling freaks, and so you see a lot of stuff. You're exposed to a lot of stuff, and I think, if I learned a few things from a lot of that, but I've learned how to deal with people. Yeah. If you got a guy that's obviously done a lot of methamphetamine, you can kind of spot that a little bit easier after being around a guy like that for several months. You not necessarily want to be around them, but they're there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to think if there was any kind of crazy stories
or inspiration
There's-
for a poem or a short story?
There's a guy I worked with, a really good friend of mine, that he just had a bad streak of luck, and I don't think I've ever gotten that one published yet. It's kind of a short fiction piece, but in not a very long time frame, he had found out his wife was leaving him, and we had some wildfires in Oklahoma that year. I think it was like the day after New Year's. It might have been New Year's Day, I think. His house burned down. His wife had come, his ex-wife, had come and swapped out the car that he had insurance on with the car that they only had liability. So his house burned up. He lost a car that wasn't paid for while she was out driving the car that had full coverage. And then not long after that, he had a FEMA trailer.
Oh, no.
And so, yeah, it was pretty depressing, but he took it very well. I mean, I don't think I would have taken it as well. But so you kind of see a lot of that human condition type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And that was just one of there's a lot of people that have bad luck streaks or, get arrested and, but it's, there's a lot of crazy stories, but I don't know if I'd be comfortable.
Yeah. No,
there might be some legal things.
Let's not go there. Well, you can save that
away from that.
For fiction.
Yeah.
So Seminole State, you said you started there in?
Yeah, I think it was 2009.
Okay.
And
what'd you study?
And I originally was going to be, I didn't really know much about, college or how it worked or whatever. I knew I was going to give it a shot. And I originally thought, well, I like basketball. Maybe I'll try to be a basketball coach. So I started out as a health and phys ed major. Mm-hmm. And I was there maybe 2 semesters for that. And my English comp instructor on one of my final papers or whatever had said you should be an English major, and I kind of knew that going in. I was in high school. I was in the newspaper class, the journalism class, and stuff like that. So I knew I could do that kind of stuff, but I didn't know if that's something I wanted to do at that point. And a lot of the people at Seminole State, Jessica Isaacs and Rachel Clapper and Christian Morgan and Kelly McBride, they kind of pushed me, sometimes harder than I would have preferred they pushed me, but they kind of pushed me towards English major, and I switched over to that after a couple semesters.
Is that when you started pursuing poetry, maybe more in a serious way, a serious study? Yeah,
and Jessica Isaacs was the main one that really pushed, and I was in her creative writing class, and they had it was like, you do a little bit of everything in there. And we got to the poetry thing, and I wasn't super confident with a lot of that stuff. Yeah. And, she kind of pushed me a little bit further, like, yeah, you can, you got a knack for it, just go for it. So that kind of pushed me towards poetry.
Did you start publishing while you were working with her, or?
Yeah, I got just in the Muse, which is Seminole State's little literary kind of publication they put out. And I think the first thing I got published in that was a Richard Nixon essay. I think it was an essay. It was kind of like identifying logical fallacies in one of Richard Nixon's speeches or something.
Oh yeah. Sounds like a good essay. So who are your favorite poets?
T.S. Eliot, a lot of the classic, I might not like everything that a lot of them have done, but most of your classic major poets, I like something of them. My favorite right now would probably be a guy that I had the privilege to meet several years back, is Yahia Lababidi. Egyptian American.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's been nominated for a push cart, or probably multiple push carts. But yeah, a lot of his stuff I can really dig it.
Yeah. How'd you meet him? And
when I was at OU, they had a program called the New Stat, and they bring in jurors every year to elect the winner of this New Stat prize. I enrolled in the program. It's like, I think there's 11 people in that class, and it's kind of they don't really advertise it, but you read the works of the jurors, then you have the opportunity over a couple of days to interview and meet them and stuff. And him and a couple other writers and stuff I still keep in touch with. But he's one that I was still kind of not 100% on the poet thing, and when I started kind of reading his work, and that I really admired it and kind of thought, yeah, okay, I can, I think I can dig this.
Yeah. So when did you finish your English degree?
I never did.
You never did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like 20, or I shouldn't say never did. I've yet to finish.
Okay. Yeah.
Be a little more diplomatic, I guess. But
you seem to be doing okay.
I'm like, yeah, I'm a...
What a book award.
Yeah.
Teaching them.
I had like 23 credit hours short at OU for my bachelor's. And it's one of those things that if I wanted to go and teach and really thought, I really want to teach, I really enjoy it, I would have finished it. At the time, I just wanted to write. And after, knowing a lot of teachers at both the public school level up to the college level, there's not a lot of time to kind of make time for writing. And so I kind of, maybe, later on in life, semi-retire, and I'd be more comfortable teaching then. But, kind of the push for time was one of those things. So, yeah, I think my last semester at OU was in 2000. I'm not 100%. I want to say 2014, 2013. I'm technically a senior still.
Oh yeah, senioritis.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yep.
For life. So when did you decide to just pursue your poetry? Are you pursuing it full time?
Trying to pursue it full time. Okay. I have bills to pay and stuff.
Yeah.
But I found a job where I'm home every day at 5:00. I'm off on weekends, so I have a lot more flexibility as far as being able to sit down and write, or if I got a reading on something, I can drop what I'm doing and go. I don't have to take work home with me, so it frees me up a lot. Probably the first time I really thought, I'm going to start pushing, and I never really did. I don't know, it sounds bad. I never really tried super hard. I don't feel like I did as much as I could have. So that might have set me back a couple years, but it might have worked out because, I think the timing that my book came out worked out really well. But for the first, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years maybe, of really putting pieces out and trying to get them published or get attention, I was like, this, at least I'm trying. Yeah. And I'm probably getting a little bit off the question a little bit, but one of the moment where I was like, I'm a writer now, was I got on my 30th birthday a rejection letter from Harper's.
Oh,
so
there you go.
I was like, all right. So
do you keep all your rejection letters?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite one?
That one was my favorite, yeah, because it was dated. It was a few days after my birthday, but it was dated on my birthday, so I was like, yeah, that's a birthday present there. I made it. Somebody rejected me, instead of just not hearing anything back or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first couple years was kind of seeing what worked and what didn't. I think I did a lot of open mic stuff. I don't think I ever did any it was all open mic stuff and presentations at like Seminole State. They put on a thing that's kind of like a smaller version of Scissortail, and I say smaller. It's grown since then. But when I was in school there, I kind of started getting used to reading stuff to people, and then carried that over to open mic stuff. So that kind of helped see what works and what didn't. The cliche, finding your voice and all that stuff. So
in your bio, says that you write on a vintage Royal typewriter.
One of probably 5 or 6.
Oh yeah, so do you collect?
Yeah, I did for a while. I've kind of maxed out. I don't have much room for them anymore. But yeah, I've got a Royal right now. The Royal Companion is the one I type on the most.
Do you use it for your early drafts? Do you handwrite stuff first?
I usually more often than not it's handwrite, unless I have something in my head that I really know where I want to go with it, and I'm just worried about maybe the rhythm of it or spacing or line breaks or something like that. But most of it's been handwrite and just get it on paper, and then from that go to the typewriter. And sometimes I skip the typewriter and use Google Docs or whatever, but I think the thing about it is it has a rhythm, and it.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that with the click-clack of the.
Yeah, you get a rhythm, and you got to kind of pay attention a little bit. You can't just hit backspace and replace something. So it's kind of like it makes you kind of think and gives you. I think it buys you time to kind of help with maybe word choice and stuff like that. But it definitely has a rhythm that you don't get from a computer. And it'll fight you sometimes, and a little bit of resistance, and so it gives it character, I think, too.
What color is your typewriter? What's it?
It's a bluish, maybe like the.
Okay, like
kind of like
Blackshear.
Yeah, maybe that little that kind of and I have that one. The Companion is the probably most reliable of them. I have a Magic Margin and a couple others that are in need of TLC. But
you have a hard time finding parts for them when.
So far, I haven't had to find parts. I've been able to kind of bend springs and clean stuff up, and they work all right. I believe there's a guy in Texas, somewhere in Dallas, that repairs them. A guy in New Mexico that repairs them. But if they're replacing parts, you could probably find one that works, for as much as the part costs.
Yeah.
But they're fun. They're more a little bit warmer than a computer, I think.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good image too. Think about a poet composing in that way. Okay, well, speaking of your poetry, I wanted to talk about your book, Strong Medicine. So when did you start working on this book? Because you published it in 2016.
2016.
Right? Okay.
Dorothy Alexander, approached me late 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. I'll say early 2015, split the difference. Approached me about putting a book together. And I had some things that were I wrote in college, and some other things that I wrote just for the book, because not everything you write in college is great.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a mix between stuff I had that I shuffled and tweaked a little bit, and newer stuff, and so it took me probably close to a year to kind of get comfortable and say, here's a manuscript. This is This is what I think. This is what I got.
Yeah.
It was less than what she wanted. She was hoping I had 70 or 80 pages worth, but at the time and being fairly new,
Mm-hmm.
we were both pretty comfortable, I think, with
Yeah.
what we ended up with.
Kind of worked out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we started the interview, I asked you if there was a favorite poem from the book that you had. And it was The Governor,
Mm-hmm.
right? Got a copy of your book here. If you could read us the title.
Okay.
And this was definitely my favorite. Read it to my office mate, like, Julie, you gotta listen to this.
And it's called The Governor, or the Copulation of Church and State. And did you want me to read it?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's go for it.
I had just finished my plate of scrambled eggs, tomatoes, sausage, and toast when Governor Mary Fallon entered the restaurant. She was mobbed by churched-up conservatives who believe that President Obama is a Muslim socialist sent by Satan to destroy Jesus and marriage. Don't pity her, I thought. This is what she lives for. I looked on as she posed for pictures with bratty kids with spiked hair. They had no idea why their parents forced them to stand next to this strange blonde woman who smiled as her lobotomy eyes glared into the camera. A hunchback woman with cotton white hair rolled her quadriplegic granddaughter to the governor. The grandmother held back tears as she begged the governor to help her crippled granddaughter. The governor smiled and sent her aide to retrieve a long white robe and a ceremonial brass bowl from the trunk of her limo. She changed into her robe and poured water into the bowl from a mason jar with the word holy written on the side with black permanent marker. The aide kneeled on all fours as the governor placed the brass bowl onto his back. The governor raised her hand and the chattering of the dining area ceased. The only thing that moved the air was the sounds of Interstate 40 vibrating off the glass windows. The governor mumbled ab amicus honesta pedimus, a Latin phrase she must have learned from wikiquote.com. She then sprinkled a few drops of water on the child as she sat helpless in her chair. The grandmother wept as the governor touched the child's forehead. Suddenly the child's arm began to twitch as if it were about to be released from the grip of paralysis. But it was only a malfunctioning nerve. Well, shit, exclaimed the governor, kicking her aide and sending the brass bowl crashing against the wall. I really thought it would work that time.
Great. So what do you want readers to understand about this poem? There's a lot happening here.
Yeah.
I think we could say and take
Yeah.
apart, but what do you think?
Part of this is true. She did walk in. She did disturb my breakfast at Cracker Barrel in Shawnee, Oklahoma. But I went home and wrote this after that. I think she might have just been elected. This was 2010, I believe. And this started out as a short nonfiction piece that got reincarnated as a poem, and I think it works better as a poem.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think the one thing that I took away from it was, that kind of tendency in Oklahoma politics to put, so much religious expectation on our politicians, and it kind of a slap into the whole separation of church and state thing, and Oklahoma has a really good tendency of doing that. And then, the kind of the phoniness
Mm-hmm.
of our current and soon to be former governor. I grew up in Tecumseh, so I got to hear all the stories. I don't know how true they were, but I got to hear all the stories about her as a young person.
Oh, really?
And so that kind of played into my view on her early on. And then when I got to really paying attention, reading more of the things she was doing, and probably more importantly, the things she wasn't doing, I kind of got a little bit more critical of her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think very justly critical of her. But yeah, I think that's the main thing, is kind of the church and state thing, and how evangelicals especially have this weird thing that politicians are the kind of the new clergy, I guess, that they're there to protect and strengthen religious interests over the interests of everybody. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that definitely does, and that kind of plays in to this state, just this place, and how maybe it can be kind of different from other states who have a kind of a unique take on that history that's always kind of fighting with itself.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of comes through.
And this was, written well before a lot of the stuff that we've had to deal with became, this was kind of written from a place of fear more than maybe judgment, I guess, or condemnation. It was kind of more the fear of what's to come, because she wasn't even in office then when I wrote this.
Oh, wow!
And so yeah,
and she's been in the news a lot lately with the teacher strike.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, so I mean, it was kind of a I don't know if it was a fear that turned into reality, or if it was reality that was already there, that was just knew was going to be bigger now.
Mm-hmm.
But,
well, the next point, and you read this one in your reading here at Scissortail, but it's identity.
mm-hmm.
Let's see, I didn't mark it.
Yeah.
There it is. Okay, good. And could you, before you read it, could you tell us a little bit about who you dedicated it to, or who inspired it?
Yeah, John Turdell recently passed away. I think it might have been about 2016. I'd have to double check that. But he was a Native American activist who was probably more prominently known for his occupation of Alcatraz in the 60s. He was kind of the spokesperson for that. The occupation of the government buildings in D.C. Very vocal person, politically and culturally. And one of the things that some of his words that really contributed, or inspired, or gave birth to this poem, were his thoughts on identity, and how that a lot of the problems that between human beings was that they've forgotten that we're all the same people. We're human beings more than we're not.
Yeah.
And the idea that there's primary identity, which is we're human beings, and we're always going to be on the level with that. And that a lot of the problems and misunderstandings come from our secondary identities, which are, American, Slovakian, German. Religion religion has a whole nother adds a whole nother complexity to that. So those ideas, I think, to me, came a lot more from that. That line of thinking than maybe his Native American centered. I mean, he's a very important Native American poet,
mm-hmm.
but I think that his ideas about identity and human beings, and something that's alluded to in this poem is that he mentioned one time that kind of the idea that, I guess people call it cultural appropriation now, but the idea that people want to dress like Native Americans, or or what Native Americans, what they think they dress like, is because it's somewhere in their memory they used to dress like that. If you were a Germanic tribe, you wore animal skins and adorned it with probably feathers or whatever you had available, and so that was kind of his inspiration on this one, if that makes much sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But a lot of his works, I think, get overshadowed. I think there are very small circles that really, really dig into his stuff, but I think he's not as widely read as maybe Sherman Alexie or somebody like that. He's not probably as widely recognized, for sure, as Sherman Alexie in a lot of circles that aren't maybe Native American. So you want me to read this one too?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
It's called Identity, inspired by the works of John Trudell. When you have to write about yourself, words become more important than they've ever been before. The ones you choose are just as important as the ones you leave out. If I was introduced to you as an American Indian poet, you might think my poems will be about how Coyote tricked Chief so-and-so, or how it's sacred to use all of the buffalo parts. But things like race and ethnicity are only secondary identities, smaller parts of a bigger picture. There are a lot of things that make us different, but our primary identity is the thing that makes us similar, the fact that we are human beings first. And after reading that, I kind of reflect too. One of the reasons I was aiming for this kind of poem was the idea that, and I didn't know how big this book was going to be, if I was even going to get any reads out of it or anything. Yeah. But I was worried about people taking my heritage or my Indianness or whatever and pushing that as kind of the marketing point, like putting that out front, like, and I don't see myself as an American Indian or a Native American writer or poet. I see myself as a writer or poet that happens to be American Indian, and I can't leave that stuff out because it's part of who I am, but at the same time, I don't want to push it as much as, I'm not as comfortable pushing that as much as some people are, and it's not taking a dig at anybody, it's just kind of the way I feel. But I think I read I think it was on NPR or something the other day, I read an article about Native American literature and how some of the stuff that's getting pushed is being really, and there's a lot of really great Native American literature out there, but some of the stuff that kind of gets published, the writer of the article made an argument that had they not been Native American and been able to market it as such, they probably would not have gotten published. And that's probably true because publishers want to make money; they're not in it for charity.
Right. And
so that was kind of a lot of the thinking after reading this and kind of thinking about it. A lot of my thinking on it is kind of that if somebody tends to introduce me by tribe or something like that, I like to read this one first to kind of remind people that I'm that, but we're more than just that.
Yeah. So your book as a whole, what do you think it means, or what do you want people to take away from it as a collection?
As a whole, in the long run, I hope part of it's just kind of the recording of this little period of time. I hope it kind of I think a lot of the stuff I write about, as far as the problems and the issues we have as human beings on this earth, I don't think the details of them might change, but I think there are going to be similar things arise in the future, and maybe somebody will read it and say, "Oh, yeah, this kind of stuff's happened before," and at least kind of maybe point to that cycle of stupidity that we're kind of good at doing as human beings, being stuck in. Yeah. And then part of it, some of it, just kind of hope. As bad as it gets, there's always going to be hope. You're always going to be able to find some kind of joy out of it. And at the very least, if you can't fix it, at least make fun of it and laugh about it. Laughter gets people through a lot of stuff. So.
That's true. That's true. What are you working on next?
Probably another collection of poetry. I'm, I don't know, conservatively a quarter of the way through a book or a manuscript, maybe halfway, somewhere in there. It's gone a little bit slower than I'd hoped to. But part of it too is that, this book being out, I'm still able to read to people that, it's been out since June of 2016, so it's going on 2 years. Yeah, going on a couple years, and I'm still reading it to people that haven't had the opportunity to read it or hear about it. So that's good too. I'm not in any hurry to get.
Yeah.
And then part of it was kind of the post-election depression stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff didn't go the way I hoped it would. And
yeah.
So it takes a little time to recover from that.
Will we ever? That's the question.
At least 4 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe never. But,
yeah, we'll see. Yeah. So what's the best piece of writing advice that you could give to other people, other aspiring writers?
Man, that's always a tough one. I mean, the fallback answer is always write. Just write. That's the way I was. If I might not, a lot of times I'd write and I didn't have any expectations of anybody ever reading it, and so that's one of them. The other one is probably read a lot, and not just stuff that people think you should read, or find something you like, somebody maybe an article or an interview of some writer somewhere, and get to know the writer, I think, more than just the work, because that drew me into writing a lot. Is I reference Hunter S. Thompson in the book, one of my favorite political writers, and a lot of people are drawn to him because of the drug stuff. It's entertaining too.
Yeah.
But the political stuff he wrote and said led me to his collection of letters, which really got to see the struggles of writing. He was at some point in New York writing for a newspaper, barely able to pay rent, had candlelight. So, it kind of makes you really realize that it's not a glamorous life, but it can be fun.
Yeah.
You might not ever make, a lot of people write and publish plenty of books, and they might not ever make, a living,
right.
Doing that. And you can win all sorts of awards and still not, do enough to make a living just writing. And once I saw, Hunter S. Thompson's letters about that struggle where he's, I'm going to be a writer, I might not make a living at it, but I'm going to write. That kind of drew me more into his work, and could kind of see, okay, so write a lot, read a lot, and probably the third and arguably the most important, in my opinion, is get with people that like to write a lot and read a lot.
Yeah.
Brainstorm, because just with the governor thing, I wrote that very early on. For the most part, it's the same. In my mind, when I was writing it, I saw a mason jar. but I didn't have the word mason jar in there. I had just a jar. And, I kind of workshopped it with some friends, and a professor at Seminole State, Kelly McBride at the time, said, that really, you need to put in there that it's a mason jar. And, so little stuff like that you might see it, you might write it and think you see it and think other people are going to see it. But there's always going to be somebody who's going to question it or not see what you're talking about. And those little details, those little nuances that people can kind of point you towards, I think really help writers a lot. So that community and and people you trust, I think, not just any old buddy, but people you trust and get along with, and you can take a little bit of light criticism from, or maybe that you don't agree with what they say, but you might be able to at least take something from it. So those are the main things: write, read, and get with people that write and read.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered?
I think so. I think that's about it. I think that
I've marked up like
Yeah.
6 places in the book, but
I mean, a lot of these, the denial poem, it's stuff that I think one thing I would like to mention is a lot of this stuff was written, as the election of 45th president, Donald J. Trump. A lot of this stuff was written as that was going on, and it was the kind of stuff that I didn't, what if I put this in there and everybody forgets about him in a couple of years because, he's probably going to lose. I mean, and I took a chance on it, and I said, at the very least I can say it recorded, hey, remember that time,
Yeah.
And then it turned into, all of a sudden he's president. So a lot of those criticisms and some of these poems about the people that, a lot of the people that are talking about these issues in denial are now running the EPA, their Department of Interior. So it's not, it's Oklahoma, but it's also gone on to affect the entire country. So, it's something I hope, I don't want to sound, high on my horse or super proud, but those are things that I was kind of glad worked out. I'm at the same time disappointed that they went that far with it, but the stuff that's recorded in here at least kind of captures the moment, I guess. What I hope is just a moment in our country and our state, which from the looks of it, things are hopefully changing. It's slow, but
we'll get there.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for
All
your
right.
time.
Appreciate it.